on digital acceleration for success. And Eklavya will, of course, talk about the book. And then, of course, I'll have a chat with all three of them on the book, but more importantly, also on the topic in general about digital transformation and digital acceleration. This program today is in partnership with TiE Pune and British Business Group in Pune. So many thanks to both of them. And without much ado, I'll hand over the session to Eklavya to take us through what this book is all about. Over to you, Eklavya.
Thanks, Advait. Let me just share my screen. Okay. I hope it's visible to all.
Yeah.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so disruption and digital transformation. Chances are that you've heard these words a lot more frequently than usual in the last few months. With the world slowly limping back to some semblance of normalcy, if you can really call it that, one thing is quite evident. Incremental innovation is not going to be the recipe for accelerated growth. Disruption and digital transformation are the need of the hour. And in fact, it's not like, COVID has exposed some glaring inefficiencies which were never there earlier. And hence this clarion call for disruption or for digital innovation. Like Satya Nadella puts it so aptly, COVID has just pushed the world into a corner where there is no option but to embrace these two sides of the same coin, disruption and digital innovation. So it's absolutely serendipitous that a couple of months ago, when Advait and I were mulling over which book we could choose for this particular theme, at that very moment, Advait got to know that the indomitable team of Ganesh, Uma, and Lavanya are on the cusp of launching their latest book on the same theme. And we really couldn't let this golden opportunity pass us by. So while we are immensely fortunate and visibly excited to have this illustrious panel of industry captains by day and authors by night, let's quickly go through some of the key takeaways from their book, Accelerating Digital Success, which will set the context for the subsequent panel discussion. By the way, if you harbor any doubts over how much insights and knowledge is packed into the 260 odd pages of this book, all such misgivings will be swept away after you read the foreword itself, which is by none other than the legendary national treasure himself, Professor R. Mashelkar. The foreword is so enlightening that I had to reread it a couple of times just to assimilate the nuggets of wisdom that are dispensed so lucidly by the great man. And moving on to the book itself, it is clearly a labor of love for the authors, or actually maybe to put it more correctly, digital seems to be a labor of love for them. And their unbridled passion for digital really shines through in every chapter, every page, every word of this book. And digital Luddites like me are thankful to them for that. Now, digital transformation is a word that is much used. And in fact, I would say it is much abused. It's one of those terms that has probably entered the jargon lexicon. And it is nowadays used as a blanket term to describe any initiative where technology has a minor or major role to play. But whether we're prepared for it or not, digital transformation is already upon us, and there are enough industries and businesses that bear testimony to this fact. The way we work and the way our businesses operate are changing, and we can either be a willing participant or a mute spectator. It should come as no surprise that in the last 20 years, more than 50% of the Fortune 500 companies no longer find a place in that much wanted list. And in fact, most of them have ceased to exist in any form whatsoever. The book also cites research that estimates 50% of the current companies on that list will be replaced in the next 10 years itself. So the shelf life of what we recognize as successful companies has shrunk by a considerable extent, and nowhere is this better exhibited than the nascent upstart Zoom video communications, where we are right now on the same platform, which overtook the, the monolithic ExxonMobil in terms of market capitalization within 6 or 7 months last year. Moreover, there is, of course, that looming threat of 75 million jobs that we are expected to lose to automation in the midst of the ongoing fourth industrial revolution, or I4, as we call it here. So before we go any further, let's be clear in terms of what digital transformation truly means. As the authors state, it's a continuous process for businesses to drive disruptive changes in their customers or markets by re-engineering or reimagining the processes, by investing in technology innovation, by using data, and most importantly, by nurturing a culture that enables new business models that will take advantage of the plethora of opportunities that are offered by this digital economy. Now, that was a long definition, so let's break it down into keywords so we truly understand the essence of the simple yet deeply profound definition. Firstly, it's a continuous process, so it cannot be a quick fix or merely be relegated to an IT initiative. This is the CEO's agenda. And if your business strategizing efforts are not focusing on a digital roadmap, then you might as well excuse yourself from the C-suite right now. The next thing to take note of is that the authors are stressing on disruptive changes. So we are not talking about incremental changes here. Instead, the focus has to be on delivering what is now commonly known as orbit-changing outcomes. And what's the starting point in this journey? Process re-engineering. Process re-engineering on all fronts and all touch points. Faced with the daunting prospect of mapping and controlling multiple variants of the customer journey, digital transformation coupled with design thinking can make that arduous task a whole lot easier by reimagining the customer-facing processes, the supply chain processes, and even the employee-centric processes like career path and skills upgradation. Next up is what they are calling investing in technology innovation. That means moving away from the traditional playground of SMAC, which is an acronym for Social, Mobility, Analytics, and Cloud Technologies. These are already well penetrated and well leveraged by most businesses. Now is the time to move to uncharted waters like connectivity devices, mixed reality, blockchain, AI, machine learning, and what have you. We've already seen industrial IoT at work with sensors relaying information on machine performance to enable predictive maintenance and minimize breakdowns. And virtual reality is also being used for simulating actual work environment for new employees during their induction process. Data is something that we are all exceedingly familiar with, but often enough, we do not make meaningful use of it. Digital transformation is incomplete without data management and, more importantly, leveraging the humongous data that exists in organizations for gleaning actionable insights. Now, admittedly, most organizations have failed to make that considerable leap from data to information, to knowledge, to wisdom. But that's where technology and possibly mature practitioners of digital transformation must step up. And the icing on the cake is, of course, the thread which binds all this together, culture. More specifically, the authors write about the suboptimal performance that is being delivered by traditional learning and development efforts, or even the greatly hyped, massive open online courses or MOOCs, which might be cost effective, but have hardly shown the kind of outcome that can justify the immense faith which is reposed in e-learning. So digital transformation has to be built on a solid cultural bedrock that enables individual and personalized learning. Digital transformation has to be hand in glove with a culture of experimentation and innovation for this to succeed. And finally, lest we forget, all of these building blocks are coming together in the form of digital transformation solely in the pursuit of one end game, which is building newer business models. It's not sufficient to be excited with a better business model or becoming a data-driven organization. Digital transformation has to give birth to new business models that can monetize data effectively. And one really does not need to look beyond the Ubers, Airbnbs, LinkedIn's, and Facebooks of the world to appreciate how data ownership can actually trump asset ownership through digital efforts. In fact, the authors share the example of Discovery Insurance in South Africa, which benefited greatly from its analysis of customer behavior that threw up an interesting tidbit that while nobody is overly eager to learn more about different insurance products, they do value some personalized advice on fitness, wellness, and health in general. And taking a cue from that, the company launched its own wellness chain as a new business, which used customer data to develop a new profitable source of business and revenue. And as a collateral benefit, the company ended up selling more insurance as well. So now that we have a commonly understood definition of digital transformation, we can immerse ourselves into understanding how to plan out a digital transformation journey of our own organizations. And as we all know, technology is forever on the move. And if you wish to build a nimble organization, then you need to integrate these ever-changing and constantly evolving technologies. The thing is that once you've decided to embark upon this path, then you can rest assured that it will not be business as usual until you've achieved your goal of transitioning to a digital-first business. Given the challenge of meeting this unpredictable onslaught of technology head-on, you have to first and foremost sharpen your design thinking skills. Design thinking, with its 5 distinct yet interlinked steps, can actually be a great ally in tackling the complex problems which are posed by digital transformation. By forcing us to adopt a user-centric or human-centered mindset, it's actually a perfect foil to counter that perennial issue of being a slave to technology rather than making technology work for us. In fact, the first of the 5 steps, empathy, is the starting point for enhancing the customer experience, and it calls upon all of our myriad faculties to painstakingly observe how customers interact with our product or service, while at the same time restraining ourselves to jump to unfounded conclusions. In fact, it is a part of retail folklore now that Kishore Biani was probably a master at this, and during the initial months of Big Bazaar, he would spend a few hours every weekend and stand outside the Big Bazaar in Phoenix Mills, Lower Parel, just to observe what was being carried out in the shopping trolleys of the customers who were leaving the store. He and Damodar Mal would then indulge in their favorite pastime of deducing the ethnographic and psychographic profiles of customers based on the shopping trolleys. So even before design thinking became a management buzzword, these guys were actually building customer personas. And the authors also cite a similar example of A.G. Lafley, the venerated ex-CEO of Procter & Gamble, whose store visits led him to understand the fundamental difference between how customers see the products on the shelf as opposed to how product managers view the same shelves. And this ushered in the era of design thinking driven product development and marketing at P&G. Similarly, the subsequent and iterative steps of defining the problem, ideation, prototyping, and testing have contributed not just to a superior customer experience, but also substantial financial gains for design-led companies. And I was not aware of this, and the authors have cited research that companies which have applied design thinking principles in their strategy have actually reported over 200% higher financial returns than their counterparts. Over 200%. That's a big number to digest. Pursuing a digital transformation strategy can be a relatively easy path when you start with a strategy that is rooted in the ethos of design thinking. So design thinking has to be the logical starting point, and it has to be further supplemented by drawing out customer journey maps. A customer journey map is, of course, a visual depiction of the customer's journey across every single touch point with your product or service, and provides a holistic view of how the customer truly engages with your business or with your brand. A well-drafted customer journey map should help you identify your customers' innate motivations and pain points, which will ultimately lead to that proverbial moment of truth when the customer makes the final choice of transacting with you. And when it comes to digital transformation, these can be quite useful for stress testing new processes, products, and also perhaps iron out those systems and those touch points which are maybe causing us, or which are maybe a source of friction for the customers. So the book is largely a deep dive into what the authors are calling the 4 pillars of digital transformation, starting with data and analytics. Data has come a long way from data management and data processing to big data and data mining. Business intelligence has also taken giant strides towards predictive and prescriptive analytics, with several startups now engaging in the field of automated analytics, using a blend of machine learning, deep learning, and AI. Fortunately, the book reiterates that the human element will not be rendered redundant, and what they're calling cognitive analytics, which is a mix of algorithms with the human discernment, will be the future of data analytics. The beauty of analytics, of course, lies in the application, and the book showcases different use case scenarios of analytics being applied for customers, for marketing, supply chain, sales, finance, and people. So basically all aspects of the value chain. The second pillar is technology, and the book dwells upon the 3 waves of digital, with the third wave ushering in technologies like computer vision, AR, VR, mixed reality, robotics, RPA, and 3D printing, which have given the much needed thrust to digital innovation and disruption. But what's most interesting is that the authors have put forth their opinions on the emerging of future technologies which will enable new waves of digital transformation. Now, these include social listening, cognitive automation, augmented collaboration, and the 2 technology twins, which is namely quantum computing and 5G. And of course, no discussion on technology nowadays can be complete without reinforcing the importance of cyber governance or cybersecurity, which certainly needs to be strengthened more to ensure a smooth digital transformation. The third pillar is, so that was on technology, and then processes. So processes is basically how they get re-engineered and transformed when digital transformations take place, right from early adopters like the retail industry or the banking sector to the more recent joinees into this club like manufacturing, education, healthcare. We can see that the core processes of product or service design, order fulfillment, and logistics have been reimagined to drive maximum possible efficiency, and clearly technology has played a critical role in enabling customer-focused business processes, as is evident in a number of case studies that are listed out in the book. And the last pillar is the true driver, which delivers all the other quantifiable outcomes that we are speaking about, which is talent and culture. If you're committing to digital transformation, then your talent and culture need to provide the fuel for this journey. If the culture or values of the organization are not aligned to the kind of change that digital transformation throws up, chances are that implementation efforts will fail somewhere down the line. Employee buy-in is a prerequisite, and cultural readiness has to be on the CEO's agenda. And if we accept that talent is a differentiator for successful organizations, then digital talent is now going to be the game changer. And there is an ongoing war to acquire this digital talent, which is not really in abundant supply out there. So the onus also lies on HR to create enjoyable, or to rather curate enjoyable employee experiences, and to build a skills-focused learning approach that are relevant for today's digital culture. Now, if you want spectacular results from your digital transformation efforts, remember these 5 imperatives. Reimagine the stakeholder journeys to deliver innovative interactions with your company across all the touchpoints. Digitize operations by investing in new or improved processes that can engage and delight the stakeholders. Build a data and analytics culture to predict stakeholder behavior with reasonable certainty. Develop an innovation ecosystem with active participation from within the industry and also rope in external experts. And finally, focus on skills that are relevant for the new digital organization, because you cannot simply afford to have digital natives within the organization anymore. Now, the last thing that I want to leave you with is something that is a very welcome addition in this book. Unlike many other books, which are largely prescriptive and theoretical in nature, this book does offer invaluable implementation hacks. I'm sure all of us are aware of the software engineering capability maturity model, which is pretty much the holy grail for the software services industry. But did you know that there's similarly a knowledge maturity model for the software services industry? And this was developed by none other than Dr. Ganesh Natarajan as part of his PhD research. And it has been covered in detail in an earlier book that he co-authored with Dr. Uma way back in 2007. That book is called, I think, Unleashing the Knowledge Force, in case you want to pick up a copy of that too, along with this book. So they've gone ahead and refined that model further to create a digital capability maturity model, which can be used to understand your organization's digital readiness. It is essentially a framework of 48 sequential questions which you need to answer, akin to a self-assessment questionnaire. And if you answer positively to all these 48 questions, then it's an indicator of digital maturity. So it is structured in such a manner that positive answers to a few preliminary questions would put you at the stage of initiation only. However, positive answers to slightly higher order questions would place you at the stage of action. And finally, positive answers to the most critical questions would be a sure shot sign of maturity in terms of your organizational capability or readiness for a digital transformation. These 48 questions are designed to address each of the imperatives that we've discussed earlier, which is stakeholder journeys, digital technologies, business processes, data, culture, and innovation ecosystem. So this questionnaire-based approach is a good step towards establishing your baseline, and then you can choose and pick the areas of improvement that can be turned into areas of strength. And yes, we are deliberately not showing any of these questions here, just to ensure that you buy a copy of the book and read it for yourself. So that's the book in a nutshell. We can't afford to remain ignorant about the digital tsunami that has already engulfed us. And this book is the perfect starting point to demystify this topic. And I can assure you that midway through this book, like me, you will also probably be slightly in awe of the authors for their enviable knowledge, which shines through in abundance. With that, it's time to hand it over to Advait for the main feature of today's program. I'm Eklavya Malhotra, and thank you for listening.
Thanks, Eklavya. That was, as always, great summary, beautiful slides, and very succinctly put. I know it's a big book, difficult book to read for a non-technical people like you and me, but I think you've summed it up very well. So it gives me great pleasure and honor to formally introduce our panelists and co-authors of this book today before I start my question answers and a discussion on the topic. First up, of course, is Dr. Ganesh Natarajan. People here on the call, most of us, I don't think, Ganesh needs their formal introduction. But in any case, all of us know him as, the ex-CEO of Zensar and Aptech. Currently, he's executive chairman and founder of 5F World, Kalzoom Advisors, as well as Center of Artificial Intelligence and Advanced Analytics. He is playing a very important role on the board of directors of SBI, Principal Asset Management, Hinduja Global, and of course, Pune City Connect, which I think recently, just yesterday or over the weekend, completed a decade, Ganesh.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think more recently he's also on the board of Honeywell India. He's of course IIT Mumbai PhD, IIT Mumbai, AMP from Harvard, and his industrial engineering masters from NITI next door from IIT Mumbai. So thanks Ganesh for taking time out, and it will be great to talk to you about the book in general, but more importantly on the topic of digital transformation and digital success. Thank you once again. Joining him is Dr. Uma Ganesh. She's the executive chairperson of Global Talent Track and, of course, the co-author of this book. And as Eklavya mentioned, she has co-authored another book with Ganesh some time back. She has huge experience over 20 years in this field of education and skills enhancement with NIIT, Aptech, and ZTV's Education Center. Across domains, she's worked as part of a Global Talent Track, which does, and of course, Skills Alpha. She's worked on a variety of committees as far as CII is concerned, NHRD is concerned, and Bombay Management Association is concerned. She, of course, is a PhD from IIT Mumbai and an MBA from FMS, which must have been quite some time back. So thank you, Uma, for taking time out, and look forward to having an engaging discussion with you. Last but not the least, we have the third co-author of this book, Lavanya Jairam. She's recently joined as the Executive Director South Asia at Asian Venture Philanthropy Network. Sorry, she has a very admirable and a very huge, diverse range in terms of functional experience, be it marketing, strategy, brand management, social media, sales, content management, design, HR systems. Very few people I know would have that kind of breadth of experience. She was working for many years, close to 12 years, as the Chief Marketing Officer at Zensar. And she's done her master's in communications from Pune University and a bachelor's in journalism, psychology, and English literature from Mount Carmel. So welcome, Lavanya, and look forward to talking to you as well. Okay, so let me sort of start with you, Ganesh, if you don't mind. I don't think India is playing New Zealand today because of the rains, so maybe net practice. So I'll start with what is called a net practice question. Important question though. Why this book and why this book now? I mean, when three of you sort of must have discussed and brainstormed for many hours, what made you say that this is the book we want to write and this is the right time to write? Was it like a lockdown related book, that everybody had a lot of time? And again, a famous, like a Salim Javed question, how did you decide that, who's going to contribute what part of the book? So maybe I want to ask this question to you, but I would like to hear from Uma and Lavanya as well.
Sure. First of all, thank you very much, Advait. And having been both a panelist and an audience member in some of your wonderful sessions, it's a privilege to be talking about a book in your forum.
Thank you so much.
To my friend Poonam from the British Business Group, who's here, and of course, Rashmi, Ravi, and Vineet from TiE Pune for being hosts to this session. It's absolutely awesome to have you here. And to answer your question, Advait, I mean, first of all, this was not a book that we planned to write, in the sense that this was more of, as you rightly said, in March, April of last year. And Lavanya, whom we call Lavi, is a very, very close friend of ours for the last almost 20 years. And the idea was to we were chatting around and said that, look, okay, what's happening? And it did strike us that two things were going to happen because of COVID. One is that COVID is going to push us away from each other. The whole social distancing phenomenon, and even today what's called CAB, or COVID appropriate behavior. And we said, what is the implication of that? And we can talk a little bit about it as we go along. The second, of course, we said that, look, and having been, Zensar's entire success in the last 5 years of my career, 2011 to 2016, was because of three reasons. One is, of course, my CFO, Bala, who's on this call. The second is Lavi, who is our marketing head, because Lavi's ability to market across nations, across platforms, across ideas was absolutely legendary. And the third, of course, was our very heavy focus on digital transformation. And because of that, and Bala will bear me out, 2011 to 2016, the market value of the company went up 44% per year, which is actually unparalleled in the history of the Bombay Stock Exchange. And it was purely because we kept innovating. You mentioned, I think Eklavya in his wonderful presentation mentioned Discovery, which was one of our favorite clients in South Africa, and John Lewis partnership in UK. and Cisco in the US, and all these, we were very close to them in terms of thinking through their entire digital commerce area. So I think that was one of our reasons. So we also said that apart from the COVID problem, there'll be a huge pull that digital will now create. Because for a very long period of time, and one of the reasons we wrote this book was there's a lot of data that while a lot of people embarked on digital transformation, true results, the true transformation that everybody talked about wasn't really coming. So people were still reporting anecdotal benefits and not the cathartic changes that you would expect digital to do. And we also felt that here was a chance for digital to really make its presence felt because it could take advantage. It's almost like what you rightly said about the great one day, the test match championship. And because maybe we have at least 2 additional people in the audience because you're not watching the test match. So there's always a benefit to an adversity opportunity. And we said the COVID problem might create opportunities for digital transformation. And sure enough, we see a lot of cliched statements which says, okay, we have achieved in the last 1 year what digital achieved in 10 years. And we said, let's research this because especially with Uma and me, we never write stuff just because we feel like writing it. When we decide to do something, we do huge amounts of research. So for the first 3-4 months, we did nothing but go in and do research, talk to people. A lot of those examples are in the book. Talk to the government of India and say, hey, what happens to the $1 trillion digital India? And if you have time in this session, I'd love to talk about that also. So we said 3 things that are waiting to happen. One is individuals becoming truly digitally savvy. And that was needed to cater to. You mentioned almost as a joke, Advait, that you and Ekalavya are not digital experts, but you're kind of getting passionate about it because it's such a nice topic to come to grips with. That was one. The second, of course, is the core of this book, which is organization transformation. And we said, what is it about organizations that will enable them to truly taste the fruits of success? That's why we call it accelerating digital success. Third, of course, digital societies, digital organizations, digital countries like Digital India. As I said, we can come back to that later. So that's why we started. And to our second question on what did we very naturally, the roles that all of us have played in this book is the roles we play in our careers. Lavi is, as I said, the expert on marketing, design thinking, customer journeys. Uma has spent a lifetime on skills and culture and leadership. And mine, of course, is more in terms of technology, process, and innovation. So if you look back at what the 5 factors of success that Ekalavya talked about in that last slide, just to kind of repeat a part of it, we said everything is on a hotbed of innovation. If you don't keep innovating, and I'll talk about it a little later, saying what kind of innovation that enables digital success. But within that, talk about stakeholder journeys, because who are prescribe something that a customer does not want or an employee does not want. So very naturally, the customer journey part and the whole thinking around that went to Lavanya. The employee journey part and of course skills and everything else was the main focus for Uma. And the technology and business process and innovation. And then we kind of got together to kind of put this book together and say, so because of this, how do great organizations become greater and get success? So I think that's really how the whole book happened. And unique contribution to the body of knowledge about digital that we have brought to bear is we have said digital is not about technology. And digital is about getting all these 5 things to work together. Then and only then will you accelerate digital success.
So actually, it's not just about technology. It's rather than.
Yeah, it's much beyond that. Technology is a touch point everywhere. And of course, it's much beyond that.
Okay. So, the subtitle of the book is obviously in terms of, post-pandemic view. Now, maybe I'll ask Uma to start with that. In your view, how does this change? If this pandemic would not happen, would this acceleration had been at a different pace? Or what's your own view in terms of how is that likely to happen rather?
Okay. Yeah, Advait, that's a nice segue for me to talk about some of the thoughts that we had brought together in the book. And at the outset, I would like to thank you for inviting me and my co-authors to share with you some vignettes of the book. And also, I would like to compliment Ekalavya for beautifully bringing together in a succinct manner, in such a short span of time, what we really intend to communicate through this book. So as Ekalavya had outlined, and as you were asking me, if there was no pandemic, what would this society look like, or how the businesses would have been able to cope? It's a reality that some of the companies, some of the businesses had been enticed into the digital transformation journey even before the COVID hit all of us.
Yeah.
But there is a vast majority of us, whether it is the governments, whether it is a medical fraternity, whether it is small and medium scale companies, and common man like you and me, we had never thought about embracing digital in the way that we have been forced to be part of this journey, thanks to
Sure.
COVID. And so in this context, if you were to look at how organizations have coped, many of them have had to literally jump in overnight, whether they had digital presence or not. They realize that now if they have to order for their materials, if they have to connect with their customers in particular, they need to have some sort of digital interface. And it might have been not really well thought through in many cases. It was a question of survival for many, as we can recall. So right from rudimentary WhatsApp kind of tools to easily available methods of connecting with customers, employees, vendors, partners, logistics, all of those came together over a period of time.
Okay.
So in that sense, if you were to look at organizations who are now part of this sort of a digital world, digital arena, majority of them have had to carry forward their processes, their methods of working predominantly the way they were doing things earlier,
Yeah.
with the exception that they managed to bring together some digital tools here and there. And that really worked because there was no other alternative temporarily. But if you're really looking at the long-term situation, as many of us have realized, that in the long term, even after the impact of COVID goes away, the world is not going to look like the way it looked 2 years ago. It's changed forever, and it's got disrupted phenomenally with digital technologies. And therefore, the fundamental question most organizations have to ask is, are we really geared for this post-COVID digitally enabled, or you can say digitally interrupted environment?
Sure.
And the emphatic answer to that is a big no.
Yeah.
And when you really look at what are those elements where that sort of change or transformation needs to take place, or we need to think differently, one of the biggest areas concerns people. How we
Sure.
have related to people in the past and how we need to relate with them currently. And that's something that has been elaborated in great detail in the book. And
Absolutely.
if we have the
And
time, we can talk about that.
We'll talk
a little
about that. And
later.
there's a separate thing on culture, so I'll get back to you on that.
That's right.
Yeah. Lavanya, two quick questions for you. One is, we've been talking of digitalization and digital transformation and accelerated journey. But again, for people like me, many of us get confused between two words, digitization and digitalization. Is there a difference in that? And how would you, I'm sure there's a difference because there are two different words. So what's your take on that? And the second question is, given your diversity in terms of the functional expertise you had across, the different kind of aspects, which part of the organization you believe has got most affected because of this pandemic and this need to digitalize? And perhaps which part of the organization has got least affected, if at all there exist any such functions?
Yeah, the second question is really multi-tiered, and I'd like to take that first. In terms coming from marketing as a background, I can see how heavily impacted that has been, and I'd like to tackle that first because of the kind of impact it has on customer versus enterprise interaction, right? Which is the primary need for being in business.
Yeah.
And I believe that overtly, visibly, the world has completely changed for that function, right? Sales and marketing, because the touch points have completely changed. And in fact, it takes me to the subject of our chapter on customer journeys and design thinking, right? And I'd like to spend a couple of minutes on that. The
Sure.
whole aspect of revisiting how our customers now consuming our product or service, and then adapting overnight to those shifts takes an amazing amount of agility in the business, right? And that would impact your production, supply chain, every other function. So to answer your question in brief about which functions impacted the most, I would think that everything has completely changed for so many businesses.
Okay.
But I think the overt front ends would be on the customer end, right? The sales and marketing.
Sure.
But in very many businesses, like in the IT sector, it was more seamless to have the employees work remotely because you needed to get them up and running with a machine in a different location. But for companies like Unilever, I'd like to take their example in terms of the sanitizers, right? They were making sanitizers as part of their hygiene products, and they were generating 700,000 units a month. And suddenly the whole world is demanding sanitizers and hoarding sanitizers, and they had to completely change the value chain completely to make 100 million items a month. So it takes a huge amount of transformation on all fronts.
Sure.
A deodorant business to become a sanitizer business, right? So
repurpose the same lines. Yeah, true.
Correct. So long story short, I think the transformation was across all functions. Everyone's feeling the punch, but yeah, the overt ones are on the customer journeys, and I'm sure we'll talk about that later. So
Sure. And the first part, the digitalization versus digitization, before we move forward.
We have our guru here, so I don't know if I actually brave that definition.
The baton has been passed to you, Ganesh.
Yes,
so.
That's the answer to that very simple. I mean, if you look at digitization, it's nothing but converting analog to digits. So it's a very simple. That's all there is to it. I mean, if you convert something to zeros and ones, it's called digitization. And digitalization is what you said and what Lavanya also said, which is the whole process of digitalizing a country. My friend Deepak Thosar has asked about digital payments. We can talk about that. Whether the payments ecosystem, a country, country, or a company. Digitalization is the whole big process around that.
Yeah. You mentioned, Ganesh, about Digital India, and I want to talk to you about it. I mean, this is, many people say this is just one of the maybe 100 slogans the government has come in the last 6 years or 7 years they've been around. Question to you directly, is this really working on the ground, and how much of that has actually translated into something tangible for companies to adapt, adopt, and more importantly, benefit?
No, it's a very good question. And let me kind of try and give you a very reasonable answer so that we don't get carried away by the hype, pro or anti anything. And if you look at it, I mean, look at the context. When Prime Minister Modi first came to power in 2014, very soon we started talking about the $5 trillion GDP India. Okay, and that, I mean, obviously even in 2019 when he got re-elected, there was this almost like a promise saying by 2024 India will be a 5 trillion economy. And obviously, thanks to COVID, nobody is in his right mind would expect that to happen. So, but it doesn't matter. See, it doesn't matter whether we achieve 5 trillion by 2026 or 2028. I know, and I'm sure all of you, except for the most diehard pessimists, will say it'll get achieved by 2030, sorry. So let's park that. But what I was working on, right from the time I was chairman of NASSCOM to later on, is to say, where is Digital India heading? So in fact, we got together, McKinsey Global Institute, Anu Madgaonkar, whom some of you may have met, then the then IT secretary, who is now not there anymore, but I'm saying now, of course, Ajay Sani. And all of us got together and we actually 6 months back did a full seminar on Digital India and said, look, it doesn't matter to us whether the GDP 5 trillion achieves in 24 or 2026, but we certainly have the capability by 2025 to be $1 trillion digital economy. Now, if you think about it, what is a digital economy? It really means, now don't confuse it with the software industry. I mean, we are a $190 software industry. And even today, there was a press release from NASSCOM which said definitely by 2025, it will be 350 billion. No doubt about it, because the companies are growing extremely well. I'm sure Thai companies are also growing well. But where the other 650 billion is going to come from is by digitally enabled India. That's digital India. I mean, Mr. Thosar talks about payments. If you look at the whole payment ecosystem, I mean, why does Paytm, a bank that I was on the board of called Fino Payments Bank, how do this payments ecosystem really evolve so well? I mean, today we have Google Pay, you have Phone Pay, so many other things happening. WhatsApp payments is just starting. So it's because one great man called Nandan Nilekani, okay, when he took over in UID, he and the current czar of the vaccine, Ram Sevak Sharma, who was the IT secretary at that time, actually Nandan's sidekick in Aadhaar, they got together and really created this concept called the India Stack. So when you talk about UPI, when you talk about everything that we in State Bank are very excited about, it's because of this wonderful platform. So our own belief is multiple platforms will emerge. There'll be an agri platform, there'll be an employment platform, there will of course be a payments platform, there'll be a health platform, there'll be an SME platform, and all these platforms together will probably contribute another 300 to 400 billion. And the last 100 billion will come from IT enabled services. It will come from more people not looking at CapEx, but looking at OpEx, as I think Ekalavya mentioned. So our whole model of digital transformation is moving from cost, the good old Google model, to experience, the Netflix and Amazon Prime model, to platforms. And the platform economy and the fact that the Ubers and the Airbnbs and the Olas and the Oyos will come together will create the other 200 billion. Now, what does it take to make this happen? And to answer,
So are you saying that?
Let me just finish one point. So what does it take to make it happen? It means huge digital infrastructure. Okay, and what is we are most excited about is what Prime Minister Modi announced in the Independence Day speech called NOFIN, which is a National Optic Fiber Network. So imagine if the National Optic Fiber Network touches all the 260,000 Gram Panchayats in this country, many of the 600,000 villages, suddenly you have a 100 Mbps ecosystem which enables this to happen. Then everybody can be on platforms everywhere. So I am very excited about the future of India, and that's what Digital India will be, and which will give huge opportunities. I mean, Thai is already very excited about what we're doing in Hubli, what we're doing in various parts of the country. Every small town in this country will be an ecosystem for job creation. And that is when Digital India will fulfill its promise. And that's to answer your question for companies. So that's the whole idea.
Sure. So you're saying the India stack is basically a foundation for everybody to build their economies and successes on to fill up that 650 million.
Yeah. Every activity will be an India stack in terms of multiple.
Sure.
The future of this country.
Lovely. That's very great to hear that it's not just a slogan, but things are actually happening on the ground. Uma, to make things happen on the ground, I mean, we always talk from an HR perspective that, India is abundant in terms of numbers, in terms of quantity, but quality of hire and, the skills is always an issue. And you've done huge work on the skills upgradation side. So how, as part of the digital transformation journey, digital acceleration journey, what is the role of human resources, skills upgradation, talent kind of thing in this year? I mean, without getting into the culture part, which will come back later.
Sure. So, see, as you rightly said, there is a huge talent available. India is very proud about its demographic dividend. And companies somehow figure out ways by which they are able to bring people into the organization. But one fundamental challenge which organizations do face, and they need to address this challenge very quickly, is the fact that large number of people who might be digital natives or digital immigrants, we are all used to flexibility. We are all used to servicing our requirements the way we would like, which means customizing our requirements. And there is a lot of digital usage in our everyday life, right? From whether your travel needs to how you bank, to how you procure your groceries, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So that's the mindset, and that's the familiarity with which you come into the organization. And here you find in the organization, we are still using probably the 20th century methods. And here people find that here is a fuddy-duddy organization where anything that you ask for, we're still using very old-fashioned forms, processes, and approvals. And even when it comes to one's own talent development, a lot of this kind of bureaucratic traditional methods continue to be followed. And this is not because of anybody's lack of desire or fault of anybody. But as I said, we have so quickly jumped into this digital bandwagon that while the front engine, to some extent, because of the pressure from the customer, has managed to change its course, the other dibbas, so to say, where people are still in those dibbas, we have continued to carry them in the same way that we used to do earlier. Therefore, today what is happening is, because the organization wants to make changes, they want people to upskill themselves. They have a different set of objectives. There's so much of dynamic element that is happening in the way the business has to be delivered to different customers, which means if we want all of the people that we have in the system to also change and acquire the skills, we need to make that whole learning ecosystem exciting and meaningful. Because let's also remember that a large number of them who come into the organization, particularly the youngsters, they have multiple options and they have also certain aspirations. If those aspirations cannot be met in this organization, they know where to go. Therefore, it's extremely important for organizations to figure out how do we make a match between the aspirations of individuals and the business goals. And this is where digital platforms come in really handy. So for instance, we have talked about Skills Alpha platform, which is a digital learning platform, which actually shows the mirror to the individual as well as to the managers and says, okay, where are you today in your, with respect to your strengths and skills? And if this is your aspiration, and in 2 years' time, I want to move up in the same vertical or get into a different vertical, I'm fed up of being a programmer, I want to get into this exciting AI domain, then where do I go? So many of them would say, oh, this organization will never give you that kind of an opportunity, so let me go somewhere else. But the digital learning platform like Skills Alpha, if companies are using, they are able to map what are the gaps that exist. You already have some strengths, but whatever the gaps you acquire, those, address those gaps, move up, and then see in what way you can move on to a different role. So that is the starting point, to put the mirror in front of people and to assess what the capabilities we require in 2 years' time or 6 months' time. But aside from that, the way people learn today, even when we are trying to make a purchase, we consult somebody. We look at influencers who can give us their opinion. Therefore, even today in the organization context, we need to figure out how we can enable them with coaches, how we can have peers giving them support, how through that kind of knowledge ecosystem which already exists in the organization, they can pick and choose what is required. So it's a combination of all of these. When organizations try to address, then they are able to create an exciting learning journey for individuals, which is customized and personalized for everybody. That is the kind of an environment which is required to be built in the days to come.
So there's, if you want to learn, there's huge opportunity for you to learn, transform yourself, and be still relevant to your organization. That's what you're saying. Okay.
Absolutely.
Lavanya, coming back to the stakeholder journey, one of the first things, 5 imperatives that even the book talks about. Uma just mentioned about, the employees as stakeholders. I want to understand from you in your own experience, and if you can share some examples. We are talking of digital transformation of business. There is digital transformation happening at an individual level also, like all of us have been sharing. I mean, this meeting should have been in an auditorium. It is happening on Zoom, which is itself is a digital transformation. So are organizations afraid that the digital transformation happening at their customers' end is maybe faster than their own digital transformation? And is there a risk and a danger of them losing out on customers?
Very interesting. And an example that comes to my mind, because you asked about my experience, is our local Puneri example that I want to give you, right?
Okay.
I've been facing the heat of summer, and I had not planned to be holed up at home all through. In all the rooms, we needed air conditioning, and that was not how it was designed earlier. So our regular go-to for any electronic equipment used to be Vijay Sales. And everybody knows Vijay Sales if you're in Pune. On their entire branding, their entire positioning is about that friendly salesman who will show you the best product. He will tell you about the discounts and he'll speak to you like he's your family member, right? So the entire value proposition of Vijay Sales was high touch, was of that individual who will guide you. Don't go to Amazon, I will give you a better price than Amazon, was their pitch, right?
Yeah.
And today they have gone online. Their MD has said on record that it is really the way the future is going to be, that they're going to have a lot more reliance on the online channel. And the thing is, they know their customers so well, and they know their loyal customers are loyal to them for a decade or more because of that customer experience that they were giving in the store. And believe me, the entire experience that I would have in the store was replicated for me online,
Oh,
because
wow.
I've completely gone through the same kind of process that you would go and click on the website, find your product, etc. But you get a call from Vijay Sales with the same friendly approach. They would have the same proactive nature on their online channel. They would come back to check if there's a delay in delivery, they will call you to tell you. So that experience, which
They
was there in
seamlessly
the
moved from
physical,
physical to digital, is it?
seamlessly shifted onto the online channel. And that, I think, is the agility of understanding your customer journey. Why are they doing business with you? And that's the link I would make to design thinking, right? That empathy was at the core of their design of their store, and that they replicated that in their online model. And I think that's what, and the thing is that the process would have completely changed for them. The kind of technology they need to adopt, the kind of people they need to now get to accept, be able to take calls and setting their systems up would have taken much more for them. But they did that without compromising customer experience. So
Just a sub question here. How do you transform this trust factor? Like you said, it's face to face kind of thing, and you trust that person that he's not going to take you for a ride just because he's getting a better commission from this brand of TV or a laptop or whatever he's selling. How do you transform that trust or transfer that trust when you're going from physical to digital or phygital as it's called now?
yeah, so in their case, because we talked Vijay Sales, it was easier, right? They already built it over decades, the loyalty, and they had to just retain it on another platform, right? It could have been easy to crumble and fail on a new platform, but they didn't.
Sure.
But to build trust completely on an online channel, I think that takes a whole lot of a different designing to do,
Absolutely.
right? When you build for trust and that's your goal of your business, then I think the designing is completely different compared to moving a model from physical to digital.
Yeah, okay. I just lost the connection for a half a minute, but that's okay. Ganesh, I think you mentioned Nofin in your earlier thing, and there are a couple of questions that without physical infrastructure, what does this digital India mean? You want to take any of that?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question that I saw that question on, I think Bala asked that question.
Yeah.
Actually, very interesting. I mean, if you look at the old days, and none of you are as old as I am, but I remember speaking in a seminar in I think it was late 80s, with a gentleman called Pankaj Ghemawat from Harvard Business School.
Yeah.
He made a very interesting point. He says, look, if you grew up in India in the 60s and 70s, he says throughout the 60s, people were waiting for a telephone. Okay, and throughout the 70s, people with a telephone were waiting for a dial tone. And today, when I crack this joke in colleges, people say, a dial tone kya hota hai? I mean, seriously, nobody heard of a dial tone before. Okay, but if you really think about it, and we were actually having a chat with Sam Petroda in the PIC, in the Pune International Center, on a Zoom call. He's just written a new book. And it was somebody called Sam Pitroda who really made this, if any of you remember, there's STD, ISD, PCO booths that came up, little yellow kiosks all over the country.
Yeah.
Suddenly India leapfrogged. I mean, Ekalavya talked about Dr. Mashelkar in the first part of the session. And if you look at Dr. Mashelkar and our friend Ravi Pandit's latest book, which is Leapfrogging.
Yeah.
India's ability to pole vault occasionally comes in very, very strongly. I mean, today, if you look at the India stack, I mean, till last year, today China is, with artificial intelligence, is again trying to steal a march on that. But India was seen as a kind of precursor to the future as far as the finance stack was concerned. So very similar to the STD, PCD, ICO, and suddenly you look at the mobile phone. I still remember in the good old days, we used to think, oh my God, one of these days we'll have 100 million mobile phones in this country. Now people are talking about India will soon have 2 billion mobile phones in this country, which means it will be 60%, 40% more than the population of the country, because everybody has multiple mobile phones. So I'm saying sometimes our ability to think beyond and achieve beyond is very much there. And which is why, if you look at, my next book, which is coming out, by the way, is on what is called Strategic Patience with China. And again, 6 months of research, and then wrote this book, which is being published by Rupa in end of August. And there we've actually researched various industries. Look at telecom, for instance. We are so far behind China, and I don't mind saying it amongst friends, in telecom. Why? Because China, one fine day, decided, in spite of being an authoritarian economy, that telecom cannot be accomplished if you have one monopolistic company. So from China Telecom, it became multiple telecom companies. And look at the success of ZTE and Huawei and all these guys. It's just absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were still, chugging along with one BSNL and BSNL, etc., etc. And it set back telecom. But today the advantages, I was talking to my friend Jyoti Agarwal right here in Pune, who the owner's family in Sterlite Technologies, for instance.
Yeah.
What Sterlite is doing and so many others are doing, they're saying that, look, let's forget about the copper telecom. Let's really be pioneers in the fiber optic revolution. And fortunately or unfortunately, again, depending on which side you're on, you have one great man called Mukesh Bhai Ambani, who has no limitation of money, whose Geo will kind of Geo with quantum computing and 5G will suddenly make the whole optical fiber network, which is why Prime Minister Modi is also reliant on the fact, I shouldn't have used the word reliant on the fact, but okay, there's a lot of entities like Reliance to make this happen. Okay, yeah. So if that happens, then suddenly Bala's question, your question, saying, oh, without the infrastructure, how will it happen?
Yeah.
Really, really happy. India's biggest problem compared to China has always been that when I remember when I first went to, when I went to China about 15 years back, everybody said, let's set up a software center in Zhuhai. And like everybody else from India, I had heard of Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, etc., etc. But I hadn't heard of Tianjin and Wuxi and all those new places. So what is Zhuhai? And somebody said, let's take you there. So from Hong Kong, we got into a ferry. 20 minutes later, we were in Zhuhai. And when I went to Zhuhai, I found no people. It was almost like a new island being built by China. Oh. They had an international airport in Zhuhai, which was 3 times the size of Bombay International Airport. Wow. They had 15 golf courses. And I remember asking my Chinese, the mayor of Zhuhai, saying, why do you do all this? He says, look, in China, we've realized one thing. You build 3 things: digital infrastructure, physical infrastructure, social infrastructure, and investment will come. Okay. When I moved to Pune in 2001, I remember talking to the then commissioner and complaining about the cart track that used to be there from Yerwada to all the way to Kharadi and beyond. And he said, Fikr mat kijiye, don't worry, in 2 years, you'll have this perfect 6-lane road between Pune and Kharadi. Now, it didn't happen in 2002. It happened in maybe 2006, 2007, but it happened. Okay. Yeah. Full vault. It was bullock cart walk, but nevertheless, it happens. So that's
there hai and there nahi kind of thing.
That's my infinite trust in India. That we will say $5 trillion GDP by 2024. Ho jayega ji. Don't worry. That's why we say that's why our book is called Strategic Patience with China.
Sure.
We will come and we will be a $43 trillion GDP, and read that book to find out how. And China will be 55 trillion. Not like today, where we are at $3 trillion GDP and China is 14 trillion. So that's the whole point. So the whole point is, we mentally as Indians prepared for that great future when Nofin will be there in all these 600,000 villages. Are we then aware of what applications to use? And as Uma was saying, are our people ready? As Lavanya was saying, are our customers ready? Maybe our customers will be ready faster than our capability, which is why our whole premise of technology, process, data, customers, and innovation. So that when you put that together, you'll see the reason why this book and why there is so much future for India.
Sure. So coming back to Uma again, and because, again and again, the discussion is coming to implementation, and implementation happens with people and the culture. And I'm just taking one of the questions there I can see in the chat box is that, you mentioned about Skills Alpha and, does digitization lead to transparency? And does everybody like that transparency? For example, there's command and control culture. I see a question there. Will digitization lead to this breakdown of this command and control, and forget the general population? As senior leaders, are leaders in Indian industry today ready for that?
That's a great question, Advait. In fact, this whole change management process or the digital transformation process is somewhat different as compared to the previous changes, because you mentioned about transparency. Whether you like it or not, in this leadership journey, this is one opportunity for organizations to recognize, leadership to recognize that the insights and the intelligence which is normally available for the management, it doesn't come to them only from the top or from external sources. Here is an opportunity for all of that intelligence and insights to bubble up right from the bottommost layer of the organization, and which is available, accessible to everybody. And therefore, leadership style has to change and is changing. And as we have been doing some of the leadership programs, and I can see Manjiri here, who is our former CEO of GDT, also here. She has also been involved in some of these programs where we have seen that there is going to be a lot of fuzziness to begin with. Nobody has a clear view. Nobody has a clear vision in terms of where are we heading to begin with. Because there is going to be a series of experiments that we're going to be doing, through each one of which there will be new insights that will come to you. And similarly, even at the bottommost layer, somebody who's dealing with a customer, you are getting those insights. We are trying out some new communication methods. And it's that ability to take the organization along, getting them to understand, or rather visualize where we are going towards. That is really the challenge for the leader, and selling that kind of a vision not only to the employees, but also to the board, also to the customers, and also selling this dream also to the vendors, because some of those partners we need to collaborate with, and that sort of a collaborative ecosystem that is required to be built. So this is in all a very exciting and at the same time very challenging times for the leaders. And if they are able to take everybody along in this journey, they require to believe in building that kind of open culture where as I spoke earlier, learning has to be continuous, learning and sharing has to be continuous. And when you're doing all of this, there will, of course, be a lot more requirement for transparency to set in. So
Sure.
It's that great opportunity I think organizations have to reinvent themselves in terms of the culture, what we are trying to label as a digital culture, which
Sure.
is a prerequisite before we invest in technologies, before we change the processes, before we think about all those new customer journeys and so on and so forth. This is very, very fundamental prerequisite
Absolutely.
for the organization's success, and leaders have to recognize this and do something about it right from day one.
Sure. Uma, in your research, would you have any examples that come in your mind, which would be the benchmarks or model organizations where this has happened from a cultural transformation, I guess a digital culture kind of thing? Any examples in India or abroad?
Well, if you were to really talk about examples, I mean, you take the example of Bajaj Group itself, Bajaj Finance.
Yeah.
I mean, the way that business has been able to go out and retain its market leadership, enhance its value for the customers, for those who are shareholders, all of these have been possible because they recognized the value of digital in every function right from the start. So while they were trying to make all of those innovations happen for the customers, they continuously have continued till today to make those incremental changes in all of these processes. And therefore, if you're talking about transparency, if you're talking about the review mechanisms, if you're talking about how one change can really mean a significant number of new policies to be sold in a month, all of these are available for all the employees and for the customers to experience at the same time. And that's what creates a belief that here is a dependable product, dependable company, dependable set of people that we can work with. So that's one immediate example I can give you from our own city.
It's a great example, Bajaj Finserv and Bajaj Financial Group. Yeah. Lavanya, I'll just looking at some of the questions that are popping up specifically for you. I'll just paraphrase some of it. Do you believe, from a strategic perspective, digital transformation is a one-way journey, or is no coming back? What happens once, hopefully COVID is behind us and we are back to normal, hopefully without, without masks and all? Do you see organizations moving back to their normal way, or it'll be somewhere in between, like, now the term is hybrid?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. If anybody can pontificate and make a guess at this point on where it'll be, but my hope is that a lot of the good things that have happened in an accelerated fashion over these last couple of years stay, in the sense that there have been so many positive shifts in terms of the acceptance of different models of working, in terms of being more efficient in businesses, in terms of creating strong partnerships, opportunistic partnerships in order to respond to market needs. All of these have been good trends which happened really quickly when there was a lot of inertia before, right? So we're hoping those good practices continue. But in terms of the world being human after all, I think the human touch and feel, meeting people, the personal contact, I think will pull us back to meeting. We may create hybrid models out of it. Some companies might say 3 working days, 4 working days. That's, working will be all the days, but in terms of working at
Work from office, you're saying? Okay.
New terms, right? But
Okay.
the WFA thing, that you can work from anywhere, you can be productive from anywhere, and that should not be a limit to your efficiency or effectiveness. I think that is something that will stay.
Okay. Okay. Ganesh, I'll pick up a question. It says Deepak's iPad, so I'm assuming it's Deepak Gupta. But the question is about the Indian famous innovation of Jugaad. Now, in this digital transformation and moving, and like Lavanya just said, that maybe we will get back into some part of physical and phygital, as it's called now. Will Jugaad play a role, and will it get lost in translation somewhere, that we are not really benefiting from this transformation?
Advait, I hate the word Jugaad, because it has all the negative connotations of, and in fact, Dr. Mashilkar and I were discussing it only last week, saying, the minute we use words like Jugaad and then we allow even people from Stanford to write about Jugaad as though it is some great innovation from India, we are kind of selling ourselves short. Okay. But if you really think about it, and thanks for asking that question, there's a segue to my innovation point. When I was in Harvard Business School, there were 3 great professors of innovation. And I was just fortunate in 2007 to be able to spend 10 weeks and interact with all 3 of them. One is a gentleman whom all of you have heard of, okay, which is Michael Porter. And Mike Porter's whole concept of innovation clusters is well known. And of course, before that, the 5 forces theory. Then we have a even greater name that everybody knows called Clay Christensen.
Yeah.
And Clay's model is all about disruptive innovation. His point was that, look, if you have a great innovation, push it out and make it succeed. It's almost like what our previous Prime Minister did with Nandan Nilekani. A guy from outside and said, boss, I'm giving you cabinet status. You make it happen, because he knew that if he stuck with all the other bureaucracy, it would have happened. So that's the Christensen model. My own personal guru, still a close friend of mine called Michael Tushman. Michael Tushman's model is what is called ambidextrous innovation. And if you take a positive spin on Jugaad, what Indians are very good at is ambidextrous innovation. What is innovation? It's primarily that, look, you have to incrementally innovate all the time. Whether with our families, what Lavanya just said, thanks to COVID, how we learned to innovate, that's incremental innovation. At the same time, you have to keep looking out for those massive breakthrough innovation ideas like Aadhaar, for instance. Okay. So if you look at even digital India, everything has to innovate. You have to keep innovating in infrastructure, what I talked about, the Chinese example, social digital infrastructure. But you have to make sure that the disruptive innovation comes to. One classic example of a company which has done this extremely well is Amazon. If you look at Amazon, it was the internet bookseller when Jeff Bezos started. And so many .coms collapsed, but they went from strength to strength. And if any of you read the book on Amazon, you'll find that they've had 4 disruptive innovations, including web services, in the lifetime of one company, and uncountable number of innovations. So I think that's the opportunity for India. Okay, and India
Sure.
I still remember, and this used to be my favorite joke. Somebody in America once asked me, who had never come to India, saying, which side of which side of the road do you guys drive on? And I had just come from a bad monsoon in Mumbai with all the potholes. And I told him, boss, in England, they drive on the left of the road. In America, you guys drive on the right of the road. In India, we drive on whatever is left of the road. So if you think about it, then you could call that jugaad.
Yeah.
We still manage. We manage Pune's crazy traffic and so on and so forth. So I'm saying we have to celebrate the fact that unlike the Chinese, in China, if there is a traffic problem on the 7th ring road in Beijing, people start sweating. And I had an American colleague when we had a flat tire when we were driving from San Francisco to, I think it was San Jose, and he really didn't know what to do. I had to say, boss, in America, there's something called a donut wheel, you can use that. So we are so used to adversity. We are so used to succeeding despite the odds. That's our key. So I'm saying our ability to incrementally innovate and look for disruptive innovation is huge, which is why I'm a great believer that the India story can be very different if we stop aping anybody and say, look, let's build our own brand of capability. We did it in IT services. We did many of the entrepreneurs that are around this chat and tie. No reason why we can't do it in digital. That's it.
So, like Anand Mahindra and Nandan Nilekani gave a new word to Bangalore, Tech Halli. You're saying ambidextrous innovation, AI is the new word.
No, I won't take credit for that. It's a Michael Tushman phenomenon. There are books on ambidextrous innovation, but it's a fantastic.
But coming back to innovation, Ganesh, is it really possible to keep on innovating every day or very frequently? And if that happens, it is going to be incremental rather than disruptive or even ambidextrous, as you say.
You're right. We have to be careful to not miss the big opportunity. Like they say, don't miss the wood for the trees. Every tree is an innovation opportunity, but it's the big wood that you can look at, okay, which is where the opportunity is. Okay, and I'm saying that's something that extremely good companies do very, very well. Right now, for instance, the government of India asked me to mentor and chair the Pune Center of Excellence for electric vehicles. And we've been doing a lot of research and ideas around it. See, today, if you look at India's biggest success in EVs, it's not the cars, it's actually the scooters. And the number of different types of electric scooters, including what my friend Rajiv Bajaj is creating, is absolutely amazing. So I'm saying where we can innovate, we are more than capable of innovating. But ecosystem players have to come together. Fortunately, in the Pune STPI, we've got Mahindra's, Tata's, Bajaj, everybody kind of helping. And we have a cohort of 24 young entrepreneurs who are all excited about EV technology. So I'm saying that's really what we have to look at, what solves India's problems, make that our innovation agenda, and through that maybe create something which can solve the problem of the world, which is why these unicorns from India and so on and so forth.
Sure.
But Advaita, I want to add another dimension to this discussion on innovation. See, often we are concerned about, are there too many innovations happening? Can we really cope with innovation? Is digital happening too fast, and so on and so forth? So I would like to put these for our understanding into 3 different buckets. So here we have outside the organization, a bunch of people, entities, startups, who are thinking about a problem and trying to solve the problem through an innovative approach, using digital technology or otherwise. So that's one bucket where innovation is happening. The other bucket is what from Kaizen concept onwards, we've been all familiar, particularly in the manufacturing organization, which is a continuous improvement. And continuous improvement is something that has been belabored, and something that most organizations in the manufacturing and process industry have got used to thinking about as to how to improve productivity, how do I use time and motion studies, how do I use value engineering methods. So that sort of an approach has always been advocated and followed by many. Now the only difference is use digital technology as well into that milieu and see how you can make those changes and transformation happen. So that's the second type of innovation, category of innovation. I would say second category of innovation that is happening, and we're used to it, and we need to make more of that happen. We can expedite that process because of digital technology. And the third dimension is innovation that happens, which requires a very, very different kind of handling, because it's the byproduct of what we are actually doing in an organization. 3M is a classic example, which actually has thrived and which has actually become an organization all of us are in awe with, because of the way they have proliferated innovation and had created a method to encourage people to innovate. You have an idea, here is a risk money, risk capital I'm giving you. Go make mistakes, figure out if you can do it, and fly with it if this idea is worth looking at. So a lot of organizations, especially in the context of digital, are actually considering this sort of an approach, that my day-to-day, everyday way of running business will continue to run. But they create a parallel organizations, if you will, where this is tasked to look at breakthrough ideas, breakthrough innovation, and see where it can go to. So all of these three kinds of innovation systems, ecosystems, need to flourish in larger numbers in our country, because we have myriad problems and myriad opportunity.
Sure. I mean, fantastic. You put it very lovely. But I have a question for you. If I can use the word, digital juggernaut. That's what is happening to organizations, and that's what is happening to all of us. Now, in this kind of scenario, and then, last 15 months, all of us have heard complaints where now that I'm working from home, the times have gone astray. I mean, my boss starts calling me at 7:30, my boss calls me at 11:30 in the night also, and those kind of things, because I'm supposed to be at home kind of thing. So this 24/7, thanks to this digitalization and digital transformation, how do you then manage work-life balance, or as increasingly it's being called, life-work balance? Will it affect our, and these days, of course, very important, a lot of discussion is happening on mental health, and obviously, people are facing those issues because they're cooped up at home, sitting in front of a laptop, and no social kind of thing. So what's your take on it, and what's your
whose answer do you want?
Yeah.
You'll get three different answers from three of us.
So, no,
Okay.
Advait, I would think that fundamentally we have to recognize that just as organizations are going through change management, this is a change management for all of us. I mean, how are we going to deal with this change? So there are only 2 or 3 ways in which you can handle this. A, you have to adapt. If your boss calls at 11 a.m. and 11 p.m. and whatnot, you got to adapt. That is one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is to say that now I need to reprioritize. I need to do things differently. Mm-hmm. So the reason why my boss ends up calling me at 11 p.m., can I figure out proactively methods by which my boss doesn't have to call me at 11 p.m. and I reprioritize my work? And how do I deal with it? That could be the second way of dealing with this. The third way of dealing with this is that this also gives opportunity and to individuals in terms of questioning for themselves what kind of careers they want to have. Do I want to be part of the regular way of working where I need to impress, when I need to be available, I need to be available 24/7? In this context, it's almost become like that. Is it what I want to do? Or do I have certain skills and I want to become specialist in certain areas? And on the strength of that, I take up gig jobs. And therefore, I define for myself that I'm going to work only 4 hours a day for 3 days a week. And I work 6 hours a day for 3 other days a week. And I take off for 2 months, every 3 months. If that is the kind of lifestyle I want, who's stopping you? There are opportunities available. Therefore, sure. I would only say that instead of cribbing, instead of feeling sorry for oneself, instead of complaining, you got all of these 3 options. Pick one Absolutely. Of the options and decide for yourself which way you want to move forward. And there is a career to be made in each one of these kind of options. That is how sure. I would like to look at this.
Lavanya, since Ganesh suggested that maybe 3 of you have 3 different answers. What's your answer on this? And then I'll come back to Ganesh.
I think Uma listed all the options, right? So I think the control really is in one's own hands to a large extent in terms of how you want to deliver the goods and in terms of striking the right model for organization and self. I think.
Sure.
And these times, I think that the empathy is high on all sides. It's about having that conversation on what works. There's always a nice sweet medium that can be worked out on which hours work or how much. But I think that's changing, Advait. I think that's
Yeah.
The hours have changed, the models have changed, but I think the understanding will be there.
Sure, sure. I just looking at the watch and we have less minutes left, so I just want to ask a specific question to you, Lavanya. I asked a question to you before in terms of which parts of the organization this digital has most affected and least affected. Similar to that, what kind of organizations is this least affected or most affected? For example, is digital transformation as relevant to the social sector as to the corporate sector?
Oh, well, just as I make my foray into the social sector. I believe, in fact, we've been having a lot of conversations on this front. There are so many issues impacting the world. There are these UN SDG goals, 17 different things that we are all trying to address for the world at large. And if you were to just take themes like a gender or a climate action or livelihoods, all of them are issues to be addressed. My vote in this entire discussion was that if we do not have a digital agenda, the whole pace of change will be a completely different ballgame. If we throw in digital, it will create that accelerated pace, and it is something that has proven in the last 10 years what India has been able to do just through things like internet connectivity, digital literacy. And I believe it will impact all of the other goals as well. So definitely digital has a huge impact on the social sector and should be widely adopted in.
Sure, sure. Great. Ganesh, I think just last 1 minute, but two quick questions to you. As the technology guru, like Lavanya also mentioned earlier, and all of us know, what's next in terms of the digital journey? What's your forecast in terms of which way this technology will go?
I really think that people will embrace digital. I mean, I'll give you just two anecdotal examples which will answer your question. The first is a very good friend of mine called Martin Migoya. Martin is the founder of a company called Globant. Globant is a $400 million organization listed on the New York Stock Exchange, 2 billion market cap. Okay, and they're a pure play digital organization. I mean, if any of you, and in fact, Globant bought Clover Technologies in Pune, which is how I met Martin for the first time, because we got Martin to actually do a little session in the Meridian Hotel, and it was really amazing. So I was just talking to them recently, and I said, look, what's the future of this collaboration? What after COVID, etc.? He said, look, the problem that we are having, which nobody seems, Uma talked about gig workers, for instance. I mean, I have a friend in Bangalore, and recently, and he works for one of the top 3 Bangalore companies, I won't name it. And recently I was asking him, so how's it going? He said, no, I'm very excited. I've just taken up a new job, and it's in another of the top 3 companies. I said, fantastic, but how did your previous company let you go? He says, no, I never left the previous company. I'm still working for them and working for these guys. Because anyway, I was doing a boring maintenance job. Kisko malum hai ki I'm working in 2 jobs and getting 2 salaries. Now, this is absolute jugaad. I mean, he hasn't even told his employer that he's not working. So it just shows you, and Martin told me this. Martin said, look, you think that everybody is working when they say work from home, but we still are working on input measures, not output measures. Output measures, because that went out with Henry Ford on the assembly lines. Okay, so his point was, we have to make it possible and interesting for people to stay in one job. So they have now invented a fantastic method by which they say, if 300 people are working as part of one group, okay, and they're all working from home, Zoom, whatever. He says, artificial intelligence will now figure out that if Lavanya is working, Lavanya actually loves gardening, which she does. And we'll find somebody else in the work group who also loves gardening. And we'll tell Lavanya, you don't know Angela in US, but we're going to put you together on Friday, get yourself a cup of coffee and have a half-an-hour chat with Angela. You won't know why. Okay, AI has suggested it. And you'll very quickly find out that you both love gardening. And Martin was telling me that this is going to be the future. That, this whole social listening, collaborative, etc., will make us much more engaged in the workplace. So I think that's one trend that you will see. And to answer somebody else's question, never going to go back to the everybody come to work and then we will think of working. I mean, this whole continuum between work-life balance, etc., will be forever. I mean, I used to joke 10 years ago that for me, work-life balance is I work 5.5 days from office and 1.5 days from home. So that's my because I love what I do. And so is Uma. And we just, so for us, work is not a drudgery, it's a pleasure. I think you will find that, there's this continuum that's happening between the two. And I'll just end with one last example. I mean, somebody mentioned Pune City Connect, my pride and joy in terms of what we do in Pune. But today, if you look at a young person from, let's say, Chandanagar slum near Kharadi, who's coming to maybe the Vadgaon Sheri lighthouse, that person is digitally tracked every step of the way. We will find her digitally using Google Maps. We know that she lives in Chandanagar. We know what her family background is. We'll send her the right message on her mobile phone to come to the lighthouse. When she comes, she will be on a track, which is what we call VConnect, which is, connecting her right from counseling to skilling to placement. And all the time she will be using Skills Alpha, the technology that Uma has actually invented. And
Sure.
Alpha technology will enable her to manage her own learning. And even when she joins Jahangir Hospital as, let's say, a nursing assistant, and in the ICU at night, she's feeling like desperate, oh my God, it's so lonely. She can actually Uberize her mentoring, saying she can get onto Skills Alpha, get onto a platform and say, look, I'd like to talk to a mentor. I'm feeling desperate. Okay, and the platform will tell her, look, you want a mentor right now, it's 11:30 at night, we'll find you somebody. But if you can wait till tomorrow, the ideal mentor for your problem is this person.
Sure,
and we'll
sure.
you an appointment. So what we're doing really is changing the complete journey of this young slum dweller without saying, oh, are you digitally savvy, English language savvy, etc., etc. But that's the future of digital. That we can transform lives without calling it digital transformation.
Yeah. Okay.
Getting
Fantastic.
into it. I think that
Sure. And one last question, Ganesh, that it's Friday evening, 7 p.m. now. After reading the book, after going through Eklavya summaries, after talking through all three of you for over an hour, as an organization, be it a startup or a MSME or even a large organization, what does one do Monday morning?
Monday morning, get your mind free of all jargon and just say that human beings love working with human beings. Practice what I always practice, which is love and inclusion. Get negative thoughts out of your mind. And then you will embrace technology, data analytics, process, customer journeys, stakeholder journeys, innovation, and build a better life for yourself. So that would be my advice.
Great. Lovely. So on that positive note, I think let's wait for the Monday morning to happen. And once again, thank you, Ganesh. Thanks, Uma. Thanks, Lavanya, for your wonderful, it was great talking to you. It was a lovely conversation. It's a fantastic book that you have written. And like Ganesh mentioned, and all of you mentioned, a lot of research obviously has gone through it. So thanks again for spending time here on this on our session on Between the Lines. Thanks again, TiE Pune and BBG Pune, British Business Group, for partnering us for this event. And before we sign off, a good friend of ours, Rohit Jarajani, he has offered that anyone who wants an autograph book, he's ready to ship it at a particular at cost to all of you anywhere in India. So if you want those details, please ping me. His name is Rohit Jarajani, or you can send me a message and I'll pass on the details. So thanks once again and good evening. And our next program is going to be again online, given the current situation. And we're talking of digital transformation, so it better be online. And it's mid of July. It's on 16th of July. And it's going to be on a fantastic, interesting topic with interesting panelists. Watch this space. So thank you and good evening.
Thank you, Advait.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.